I almost sound like a broken record at this point, but the wealth tax is the big tax that so many Western countries are talking about, and it's becoming a bigger and bigger thing. My team sees it when they read tax papers, when they go through policy journals. But you don't have to be a tax geek. You just have to look at the news headlines. And recently I came across a news headline from a country that I never thought would be talking about raising taxes and imposing wealth taxes, and that's New Zealand. If you live in New Zealand, I'm going to talk about the coming wealth tax and other rising taxes that could affect you in the coming years. Hi, I'm Andrew Henderson here at Nomad Capitalist, our team of 36 people around the world, our network of global experts curated by me over the last dozen years through over 100 countries of travel, and of course, me, work with 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs and investors to legally help you go where you're treated best. You can learn more at nomadcapitalist.com. Let's talk about New Zealand, a country I never thought would propose a wealth tax. There's a gentleman named Terry Baucher who writes for interest.co.nz, and the headline is Wealth Taxes. Taxes to address the climate emergency and more Ird Enforcement are all trends likely to be seen this year. Now, the article was written for someone who has some tax experience, and so I don't want to read the entire long article. So let me summarize the points. Number one, housing. This has been a big issue in New Zealand. Lots of restrictions in terms of who can and can't buy housing, such as those of us who don't live in New Zealand. But the expert is saying not only does he think that we'll see a capital gains tax, we'll see more restrictions on landlords, we will see tax hikes on landlords and on property investors, particularly to favor first-time home buyers that the government is trying to get into the game. So basically, if you're a property investor in New Zealand, you will pay more. And in general, capital gains tax, one of the things that New Zealanders have not had to deal with, like as most Westerners have, could be coming into play. The second thing he talks about is IRD enforcement, how you're going to be pursued more often. And so not only potentially higher taxes, but more enforcement to make sure that you're paying all the taxes that you should be paying. Nothing wrong with that. Not suggesting anyone do anything wrong. But you're going to see more enforcement. The third thing he mentions is the wealth tax. He talks about how the UK's Wealth Tax Commission has been watched by many people in New Zealand as an example of what they could possibly be doing. And we talked about the UK wealth tax proposal that's been floated since around Christmas time that would tax anyone with more than £500,000 at 5% of their net wealth. They were nice enough to let you pay it over 5 years, or they would be. Basically meaning that anyone who had a house within anywhere near London would be qualified to pay this net wealth tax. And so in New Zealand, he says the government is watching and they are closely paying attention to say, hey, should we institute a wealth tax? And he's saying, hey, that could be used to pay for COVID recovery. It could be used to pay for the climate emergency. And again, I see a lot of talk in the article about leveling or evening the playing field because it's talking about how New Zealand, people cannot afford to buy homes, et cetera, et cetera. Now, what we've talked about here at Nomad Capitalist for a long time is competition among governments is heating up. And so for me as an employer, for example, I can hire not just from where I'm from in the United States, I can hire from practically anywhere on earth. People speak English, they can use a computer, they have a good attitude, and in response, I've chosen not to deal with the complex tax system of the U.S., the increased litigation risk of the U.S., where everything is an affront these days, the high cost of hiring in the U.S. I've chosen to go and hire people in places where it's more affordable, more tax-friendly, more regulation-friendly, just more friendly overall. And in turn, over time, take the top performers and pay them to some kind of a US or New Zealand standard to make sure that they stick around. But it's a lot easier to scale in places where, as we say, you're treated best. And so as a result, you've seen countries like the US and New Zealand and the UK do absolutely nothing to fight back or to try and be competitive. In fact, they go the other direction. We see countries like the UK, like Canada, many states in the United States, as well as Elizabeth Warren at the federal U.S. level, and others like her, talking about imposing wealth taxes, which have been proven to be failures in most European countries. More than a dozen European countries used to have wealth taxes. Now only 3 or 4 do. But what do legacy brand countries, as I call those like New Zealand, learn from past failures? Nothing, because they think that their brand name is good enough, and they think that you'll stay there and put up with it. They think that you'll stay there and you'll pay more taxes, you'll pay a new capital gains tax, you'll pay a wealth tax, you'll deal with the IRD snooping around in your business more often. You'll put up with all of that because there's nowhere else to go. There are politicians in some countries that literally say, "Where are you going to go?" Oh, only some of the other 200 countries which have emerged as competitive places to live and invest and do business, and oh, by the way, pay much less in taxes over the years. And so this is the equation that I never thought would be coming to New Zealand, but may now be coming, is you may be faced with a decision. Do I choose to stay here and wait for the government to raise taxes to pay for whatever their new pet project is, because they don't tax us enough? Do I want to stay here and be targeted as the evil rich guy because the playing field isn't even enough? Is that's your fault and not theirs? Do I want to stay here and put up with whatever they can come up with, or do I want to go where I'm treated best? And I think you're going to see more New Zealanders decide to go where they're treated best. When you can move to Vanuatu or Singapore or Malaysia, Thailand, the Philippines, Portugal, or many other tax-friendly places that offer zero tax, like the UAE, territorial taxes, like much of Southeast Asia, which you can easily get to from New Zealand, non-dom or lump sum or tax exemption programs. Why would you choose to stay in New Zealand? Why would you choose to keep your investment dollars there when you can get better returns in potentially a more stable currency with lower taxation and perhaps nicer weather or friendlier people or whatever else it is that you're looking for somewhere else? For some reason, the English-speaking countries of the world that have long dominated the economic freedom ranks now have a lot of competition, but they don't realize it. If I lived in New Zealand, here's what I would be doing. I would be establishing a second residence somewhere else where I wanted to live, potentially in a Southeast Asian country where maybe I put some money in the bank, maybe I buy a piece of property, maybe I buy an investment property, maybe I put some money in government bonds, or heck, maybe I even just pay a small fee. I get my 1-year or 5-year or 10-year residence permit under my belt, and then I examine what's going to happen next. Perhaps I start to move my money out of my New Zealand bank and into a bank in a Singapore or a Switzerland or a Liechtenstein or somewhere else, the UK even, some of the UK territories, where I have some of my money out of New Zealand. Perhaps I start selling some of my properties in anticipation of higher taxes and I want to get out while I still can. And I put that money in property markets somewhere else where returns are higher, where I can invest in more stable parts of the city because prices haven't gone wild as they have in New Zealand. And then I'm going to once again stand back and say, all right, now I know if I need to leave New Zealand because they want to raise taxes, I can. I have a place I can go. Potentially I even have a home already owned there that I can move into, and I can say, hey, New Zealand, I'm leaving. Stop taxing me, please. I don't want to participate in your wealth tax or your new tax enforcement or whatever other taxes you come up with. That's what I would be setting up if I were from New Zealand. Heck, if I were from any other country other than the United States that didn't tax me on my worldwide income if I simply chose to leave, I would have the infrastructure ready to go that I could leave at any time I want. Many of my assets were already FCs and overseas, and I wasn't reliant upon New Zealand for producing all of my passive income from real estate or from whatever else it may be. I think now is a time to realize that just as I realized about the US many years ago, New Zealand is not a panacea. It's done very well in many things. But if I'm a wealthy person there, it seems that the tide of tax the evil rich is finally coming to perhaps one of the last bastions of economic freedom in the English-speaking Western world. And that means it's time to do what the rest of us have already considered doing or have already done, which is to pack our bags and leave for greener pastures. This is something that we're going to continue to monitor. But for me, it was only a matter of time before a country so minded in equality and how the rich are terrible would decide to introduce capital gains, would raise taxes on investors, and would start reaching into your pocket because you've accumulated some wealth. Whether I'm from New Zealand or anywhere else, this is the plan that I would execute so that I always have a plan B for when times get tough and politicians get greedy. How can Nomad Capitalist help you? 4 ways. Number 1, subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell to make sure you get our new video every day. Number 2, get a copy of Nomad Capitalist, the book. You'll learn a lot of my personal experiences over a dozen years of studying this stuff, as well as exactly some of the strategies that you can use to build your Nomad Capitalist plan. Number 3, if you're not sure where to start, but you want to come and learn from my team and I, you want to come and mingle with like-minded people, learn more about our live conference, Nomad Capitalist Live. It's coming up soon. And number 4, if you want some help right now because you've got a burning issue, you need something solved, you want to lower your taxes, get a second passport, or build the Nomad Capitalist lifestyle of your dreams, go to nomadcapitalist.com and click on Become a Client.